So the story that I tell about this is from U Squared by Price Pritchett. And there's a story about a fly relentlessly banging into a window. And it's under the illusion if I try harder, I'll achieve the goal, which is to get outside the window. What it doesn't realize is it will die under that illusion.
Philip Brady, former global manager with Citigroup.
What would you change and why?
Director at Vitamin P Coaching. TEDx speaker.
Instead, I focus on coaching and developing people's ability to be. Explain that to me.
He helps executives transform their thinking and reach their professional potential. You are listening to the Pecha Kucha podcast.
Philip, welcome to Pecha Kucha. I want to start with a question that we ask every guest, which is exactly the same. What does success look like for Philip?
Straight in at the deep end, 10.0. Success looks to me, as revenge against death. Death is a closing and a narrowing of all our senses. We can't experience as much, we can't see as much, we can't hear as much. Life, in response to that, and my definition of success, is opening as much to life as possible. So what that means is experiencing as much that we can see around us, hear as much, different kind of things that you could hear, like the sound of a baby laughing or an old person sharing some wisdom. Opening to those moments in front of us as much as possible is almost like revenge against death and that kind of closing to life. Yeah. That, I think, is some of what success is to me. It would also be then finding ways to help other people open to experience more of life coming towards them and being able to equip them to do that, and to do that together, I think makes any experience a little bit better.
It's very, very interesting concept. I love it. I absolutely love it.
You said go to 10.0, right? Permission to go.
You've now me at 12 and I don't know where to go from here.
That's okay.
Looking at your career, you obviously studied finance, you went into the banking sector, you're now into sort of life coaching. How did you become an executive coach? And I suppose more importantly, how did you become a TEDx speaker as well?
Yeah, well, TEDx is thanks to Sean and JP and Henry inviting me to do that. I had it on my radar for a long time to do something like that. So I was lucky when the opportunity came up to be ready and hopefully useful. And it was a great opportunity, and I hope to do many more in the future. When I was 12, a friend of mine, somebody really close to me, was suicidal. And I sat with them in my sitting room. And I know I was 12 because of where it was. And the sitting room is where we moved to in Navan. So I knew it was that house. That was 2000. And I had no answers for their challenge or struggle. I only had questions and being present. And so I couldn't say, do X, do Y, do Z, whatever it was. I could only just sit with them. And I could only just say, like, tell me how you're making sense of it, or what else might this mean, or what else could be possible. And so in my bones from a 12 or 13-year-old, asking questions and being present has been ingrained in them. Yeah. So I started reading about personal development from that age, even just before, because my mom bought me a Stephen Covey book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Tony Robbins, one of his books, Awaken the Giant Within. So I've been involved in that kind of space of personal development for years. In college, I studied entrepreneurship as well as finance and IT. So I read a range of things that, again, in a business context, how can you be more successful? You don't just focus on the business, you focus on the mind. So I paid attention to personal development a little bit deepened at that point. And then in 2013, I qualified as a kind of like an executive coach. And then the year after, I moved up north to join Citi, where I worked for roughly a decade. And during my time there, I got to work with some of the most senior leaders from around the world, coaching them one-to-one, delivering leadership programs as well. So I was flown around Europe, Middle East, and Africa, as far east as Dubai and as far south as South Africa, and a couple of places in between. So I had an amazing experience. But again, it's years of doing the work internally that nobody will see in the mirror.
Yeah.
Nobody sees it. Yeah. So it's that kind of journey of from 12, building and deepening both my hopeful ability to be able to do it for other people. But also, I mean, research is me search. So I'm looking outside of me in books and talks and courses and whatever to figure out myself a little bit more. And I mean, that's a forever journey. One that I'm still on, one that I'll be on forever. And it's only getting more interesting, more energizing, but also I would say more peaceful. I'm coming at it from not a place of lack, but from a place of fullness. And that feels quite different as well. And more or less now I'm running a coaching business for the last year and roughly 2 years, but year and 4 months on my own, self-employed.
That's something I want to talk a bit more about, because I'm just reading on my screen here. I took a note of this because on your LinkedIn profile, and I want to read this exactly as you've written it. You did the doing, but it didn't work. Instead, I focus on coaching and developing people's ability to be. Explain that to me.
Well, tell me what you understood from it as well. Why did it stand out to you?
Because I think from me, it resonated that I have done a lot of the doing, and maybe it didn't work. I've copied people, I've followed people, and the being is more about me, it's more about myself, understanding myself, understanding the awareness of me, and I suppose, what do I want out of this, and where do I want to get to, and stop worrying about, not worrying about other, because people that are very close to me, I value their opinions greatly, but be more about myself and challenge myself rather than try to copy and mimic other people.
Yeah. So the doing you're seeing as other people's stuff versus
Chasing,
actually what's authentic to you or within. So doing, I mean, the story that I tell about this is from U Squared by Price Pritchett. And there's a fly, so there's a story about a fly relentlessly banging into a window. And it's under the illusion if I try harder, I'll achieve the goal, which is to get outside the window. What it doesn't realize is it will die under that illusion. It will just keep banging into the window, trying harder, thinking trying harder is going to work. Where if it paused long enough, there's an open door. There's a place that it can also achieve its goal by trying easier. And the trying easier, that's slowing down from just relentless effort, I believe is being rather than doing. And it's not to say that there's not a time and a place for doing. If I did nothing for my business, it would not grow. But I also know that if I don't resource myself in the moment to be able to be where I am, I would never be as effective or as intentional as I want to be. And so my shift from helping people, so let me maybe just dig into this a little bit. I typically walk the people that I work with in nature. And that's very different in nature from the confines of an office or a building, or I imagine it as like a container. Somebody that I worked with described themselves last year as a bumblebee in a lunchbox. So they had this relentless amount of energy that was just being contained by where they were.
Sounds my head.
Well, hey, let's have a conversation after this. I'll give you a mates rates, right? Double the price. You can quote me on that. But it was so there's an energy there that's bubbling, but that's contained. And I think the energy is we can just relentlessly do the do, but also when we get these people living or existing or being outside of that container, they can see that it's containing them, and they can see that they've energy beyond it, and they can see that actually imagine how much easier I could achieve what it is that I want or the impact that I want to have. Because the people I work with, I call unicorns, Jason. These are people who get results, but they don't do it at the expense of people. They do it with people, for people, and they want to have an impact that positively impacts other people. I call them unicorns. They don't exist. They're not meant to exist. They're not the stories we hear, the stories we read, any of the publicity around what leaders are meant to be or do. I mean, these people embody it. They are there. We just don't see them. They stay quiet behind the scenes, and they're doing really thoughtful work. They're typically the people that I work with. Yeah. The being is this focus on, so I mean, you've two ways of, let's ground it in two concepts. Being and becoming. Becoming is that acting into the world. It's an activation energy. The being is, can you be in the moment in front of you? Can you just be present? And I mean, your guest before me, that I looked at the episode, it was awesome when I looked at it. It was really thoughtful. He was describing like intergenerational trauma. Intergenerational trauma exists because I carry it, you carry it, we carry it with us. I was listening to something in the car on the way in. That's why I know roughly about it. It's about how can you be with what's present. So you'll notice a trapped sense of energy sometimes when you think about certain things. We typically resist and we distract ourselves with doing. That's not helpful because you don't never gonna release the energy that's built up from that trauma that's built up and trauma stored in your body. Being with those kind of energies, being with that frozen states, releases it and releases a lot of energy. And I mean, where we're located, is full of frozen energy that locks people in a time and a space. If we can release some of that, I think beautiful things can come from the healing of that. So that focus on being is being in the moment, being present, being grounded, not being, I mean, we talked about coffee before recording, right? I drink coffee most mornings, wait 90 to 120 minutes before you do. It makes a big difference. And I find coffee makes me more anxious, have more cortisol in my body, lowers my heart rate variability, so decreases my ability to perform in the moment. But when I regulate it, and I mean, I have a glass of water between coffees, deliberately as a small practice. When I drink too much coffee, I'm less able to be in the moment. When I regulate myself, I'm more able to be in the moment. That focus on being changes completely the effort, changes completely how we live. And I think instead of caught in hamster wheels going nowhere but really busy, I think the focus on being helps you be a little bit more intentional. That was a long-winded answer.
No.
We went around the blocks and back, but...
It's very deep in sense of, like, I'm listening to that and I'm curious. I'm hanging on everything that you're saying. So I'm really, really intrigued. But I'm also intrigued to understand, my understanding of, obviously, the life coaching sector is... I see a lot of people obviously going and getting certifications and they're using a model and a fixed model that people have been practicing for years. Is this quite unique to you? Because I haven't heard this before. I haven't, it's not something that is bouncing about there as a model that is certified. This is something obviously that you've come and in practice it's working obviously for you. Is it something that you've developed, is it?
Yes, but I mean, we stand on the shoulders of giants. I mean, maybe let me narrow it to two areas. So I'm interested in two spaces for people. One is well-being and one is performance. Well-being is, can we ground you where you are and make sure that your well-being needs like connection, like learning, like active noticing the moment and kind of giving back or feeling a sense of contribution. So can we look after your sense of well-being is really important. And lots of people are burning out and typically that's a well-being need. And I'm deliberately not going to call it a mental health need because, I mean, we can dig into the distinction between the two. It's really useful. But performance as well, I mean, there's a lot of leaders that I work with and I deliberately call myself a leadership coach, not a life coach. And I can explain why as well because it's a useful distinction. The performance part there, they actually don't need less challenge. They need more challenge, but they just need it in a more intentional direction rather than being told what to do. And sometimes that can be a challenge outside of work, which leans towards a life aspect of it. So maybe you want to run a marathon or do something like that. I'm not going to decide what that is. I'm also not going to prescribe a plan to be able to achieve it, but I'm definitely going to be able to raise your awareness and give you the capacity within that you can take that on and intentionally choose it from a place, again, of fullness, not lack. With the well-being space, again, some of the research that I've heard is we don't necessarily have mental health challenges because mindset and cognitive ability is not actually the challenge. We sometimes misdirect attention with solutions. Instead, it's actually, can you emotionally regulate your nervous system or your body? If I experience anxiety, for example, in my body, so I felt it before we pressed record, I did a little jump and I'm just settling my body. I'm releasing some of the buildup of energy. If that buildup of energy gets too great, we're wandering again. This is okay to keep going, right?
You keep going.
If we can't regulate that energy, it will eventually, it's very quick, but I'm going to delay it slightly. It will eventually present itself as a thought. I'm not able for this. I'm not good. So therefore I call myself an anxious person. That's not necessarily true. It's just your body experiencing the moment in front of you. But we judge it as bad, and then we judge the thoughts as bad, and we say I have a mental health challenge, when actually I'm just not able to regulate my emotions. It's very different. So what I want to do in my work is, and maybe this is linked to your model question, right? And I promise I'll come back to it, is build a model that helps people, again, be in the moment with whatever's happening so that they can intentionally choose how they direct that to the future. So I typically focus on 3 things. Physiology, let's regulate your body. That sends the signal or is the experience of emotions. Emotions, depending on if you were stressed coming in here this morning or you were calm and recharged after an Easter weekend. We're recording this at the end of May, aren't we?
Yeah.
Not at 4th of April. Your thoughts are very clear in times of recharge and re-energize versus stress. So that has an impact again. That's going to change how you show up. If I can get you to be able to regulate your emotions, the thoughts look after themselves. They're just thoughts. But again, we judge these things as bad. I've had thoughts recently that if anybody knew my thoughts, they'd be like, oh, how do you still show up and do what you do? It's like, it's just a thought. It's just a thought. It's fine. So my model typically is those 3 Ps. My business is vitamin P. My wife calls me vitamin P, so I had to call my business that. Was the only way to do it. But P stands for physiology. So again, ground you there. Passion, so generate energy in the moment. And channel the energy. If it's anxiety, can we channel it, not get defeated by it or move back? And then it's around purpose. Can we direct it towards a meaningful future? So I mean, those 3 things, there's thousands of hours under each of those words. It's not necessarily mine, but it's just 3 words that I had to put on my business card for my business. Yeah. But I'm trying to build a model roughly around those 3. But each of the areas are all scientifically backed, but it really comes down to, can we make you well in the moment? Not judging what you're experiencing is good or bad, just accepting and experiencing it. And then can we move you towards an intentional future? Roughly, that's the model.
Yeah. No, I love the concept that you're talking about there, because I often find whenever you see models, we try to put round pegs in square holes. Sometimes, we have this model and people are afraid to adapt and step outside it. You've described something there that is you have a framework. The process stays the same, but it's adaptable.
Oh, and so can I push back on that?
Yes.
The framework, I never hold that in my mind.
Yeah.
All I do is try and greet the individual and be present with them. And I have those kind of like tools or let's call them components of the model, right? Yeah. That I can lean on. I mean, some people say to me, so what will our sessions look like? I'm like, I don't know. Do you need a structure? Yeah, structure would be really helpful. Okay, I'll use GROW. First model I learned as a coach when I was in 2013. We'll get clear on what you want. We'll get clear where you're starting from. We'll think about some things that could close the gap between those 2 things, and then you'll take action. Does that help? Yeah, that's a useful container. Now I feel safe. So again, we're trying to make people feel safe in the moment. And sometimes containers are helpful. For other people, if I did that, they would say it's too constraining. No model, please. So one person I work with lives in the future, 10 years into the future, extremely strategic. If I was to say, we'll structure the conversation, would not be helpful. But again, I've learned the models, then I've grown beyond them, adapted that I can flex to whatever is needed in the moment. Okay. And I mean, the reason I deliberately don't call myself a life coach is because you and we could now just become life coaches. Do you want to become one? Yeah. Okay, now we're one.
I know.
Right? So it's really easy to, there's no robustness around models with that kind of space. It's just have you lived? Okay, yes. I mean, I get messages on Instagram, 14-year-old life coaches. I mean, no thank you, I won't take your advice. It could be useful, but you deliberately or you immediately have a response to that. I'm trying to go through accreditation, and I mean, I'm becoming a coach supervisor to be able to develop and support fellow coaches. I believe deeply in coaching, but I also think there should be some level of standards. And so I'm trying to think about that.
I can't think of his name. He's actually a personal trainer, sports scientist, Andreas. I can't think of his second name, and he used this wonderful quote around gurus. He talks about gurus, life coaching and things, and he says, a guru is somebody, you become a guru when you can't explain your own bullshit with science.
Yeah.
I don't want to be a guru. So what he's literally saying there, what I do, there's scientific principles there. I just adapt them and use them to suit the moment, suit the person, suit the individual. But there is science to what I'm doing. I'm just not making this stuff up. And
Yes.
that's, I think, where we're...
Did I just become a guru there? Is that
No,
what you're saying, Jason?
no. You're
I'm gonna
far
get
from a guru.
I'm going to get a badge and a
Far from a guru. And I think that's what the good thing. I think that I can clearly see the science behind what you're doing and the learning and the experience is there. It's getting to that point then of trying to allow other people to see that as well, that it's not this life, as you say, life coaching model, or it's not also just some pigeonhole that we're just going to squeeze somebody in because you have that.
Yeah, don't push me into a box.
Yeah.
I don't want to be in
love
a
it.
box. I want to contain the world. I don't want to be put into a box.
Yeah.
And yet, I mean, that's also my development, because when I try to explain my model or ways of being, it can be too open-ended. So some of my work is actually trying to narrow, to make the complex simple again.
Yeah.
That's some of the feedback that I used to get quite often, was learning how to communicate the complexity in a simple way.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned challenges. What are some of the challenges you're seeing from, I suppose, the leadership world at the moment, in terms of are there any trends out there in terms of challenges? I'm obviously thinking of the current situation we're in with technology even. What are you seeing in terms of challenges for our current leadership?
I think let's go back to the doing example, right?
Yeah.
So typically when people experience challenges, they go back to reaction, the past, patterns of being that served them before because it got them promoted, it got them recognized, it filled an ego or a status need that we all have. I mean, we'll compare ourselves even in this conversation and go, I have this, you don't, therefore I'm above or below. We do this naturally, and this plays out in organizations. So, I mean, again, that's just to say we go back to past patterns of habit and reaction because it's quicker under pressure. If there's pressure and there's time to change, I want to go back to the quickest thing so I don't have to think because I have to move on. One challenge I see a lot of is that people that we call leaders, because they're senior, are managing. They're not leading. So a lot of them are living in the today because, again, the doing, it got them rewarded, but they actually don't have the time or space, or the work that they've been given is too great to even allow the space. That's another challenge. Third would be just the needs of the human bodies we all inhabit. The system that they operate in does not allow them to honor those needs. So, for example, back-to-back calls. No time to go to the toilet, no time to eat, no time to go outside and breathe. I mean, these concepts that we know make an impact on performance, they literally don't have time for. I know somebody whose calendar is scheduled like 6 months in advance to the 5 minute. Ludicrous. So where's the space for being? There's none. So the system needs to evolve. You won't be able to, we can't change. System's really hard to change, but I mean, I think we're coming to an inflection point where it'll have to transform, which is quite exciting if we hold on to that possibility. The system stops people being human. The fact that they don't have time to be human just means that we're trying harder in the wrong direction, not taking the time to move in a more thoughtful, useful, longer term, 7-generational impact direction. They're probably some of the main ones.
You're obviously a qualified personal trainer as well.
Qualified PT, yeah.
It's something, just some of the things that you're saying.
Thanks for looking this stuff up.
Yeah.
It's really robust.
Research is a great thing.
Yeah.
So, as a qualified PT, first of all, I want to understand what came first. Did you want to be a qualified PT before you want to be an executive coach, or
No.
what way did that come around? And then, was that if it's the ladder? So, if you became a qualified PT as the ladder, was that a personal thing from a hobby, or was it more aligned to your executive coaching? Was it with purpose?
Absolute purpose. So during COVID, so I qualified during COVID, but before that I could see, I was curious about the connection between the mind and the body, because one of the leaders that I was working with, As they walked towards me, I could see their body told me everything I needed to know. Weighed down, heavy, looking down, defeated, heavy. And I'm like, that's interesting. Any useful model of well-being will have activity or movement or like exercise as part of it. So CLANG is the UK model. The third letter is A, active. So movement is really important for well-being. So I asked the question then, can it be good for performance on the other side? And the answer is yes. So that's why physiology features in my kind of business components or model. But I qualified as a PT because I could also see in the COVID, the impact of COVID on individuals was isolation, inside the house, less movement, less exercise, all of those kind of things that go against any kind of useful well-being model. Movement, again, trauma and kind of difficult emotions live in the body. We inhabit these emotions. That's how they are experienced. If I can move you differently, you can experience and be a very different version of you. If you stay stuck, it's very different. All those things become frozen and we lose some of the energy within. So I qualified as a PT, never to tell you how to squat or deadlift. I could show you, but I don't really care about that. It's just to say, from a nervous system perspective, literally from the inside out, I know the body, I know the mind, I know the emotional range, I know all of this kind of like tools, techniques, and everything got to do with executive coaching. I know the world and the human, but also if we want a different future, we have to move differently. We have to act in the world differently. We have to become different. We do that from being in our bodies, in the moment, and just experiencing it fully. So it was a little bit of curiosity, a little bit strategic, and I just had the best of time. And I do a lot of work in the fitness space. So I coach gym owners and PTs from around Europe through ECA, Elite Coaching Academy.
I know the guys.
Yeah, so you know Lenny and PJ. So they do some cool work around Europe. I coach on their mastermind. I'll go to a 2-day mastermind in a couple of days. And I really believe and I see the impact of fitness, again, moving people because, again, it's underpinning their well-being. And if I can get leaders to even take movement seriously, which, again, it's not something I help them with, but it's definitely something I invite them to consider. And I mean, the best people that I work with are religious about movement.
Yeah.
Religious about it.
And you mentioned I obviously know the guys at ECA as well, and even their model, in terms I can remember them setting that business up, and they were in a world where everybody was charging £300, £350 for a PT qualification, and those guys went in at thousands of pounds. I can't remember the exact figure, but I think we're talking about £2,500, and they believed in what they had to sell. They believed in the knowledge and what they were selling, and it's one of the most successful, and if not one of the best, PT qualifications I'm aware of in the sector.
Yeah.
So it just goes to show, doesn't it?
Well, it's huge. Yeah. And again, it's different to learning the knowledge. Yeah. So that goes up to the mind. Yeah. Experiencing it lives in the body. And we must embody these things, not just talk about them. And I mean, over my 20 years looking at this stuff, I've read all the books. So I had the knowledge here, but until I acted it from the body, nothing changed. And I had all this stored stuff that ChatGPT just does. Yeah. My work now is taking concepts and embodying them and helping other people embody them. That's the work.
Yeah, I love it. Absolutely love it. Moving on. Obviously, thinking about the leadership world, I suppose, if we want to call it that, what do you see are going to be the challenges and trends emerging in the world of AI in leadership and management?
So I heard a really cool kind of analogy or metaphor from Dr. Alan Watkins. And what he talks about is the difference between bumblebees and flowers. So I said earlier on about leaders, one of the constraints or one of the kind of challenges that they face is that they got promoted from the doing. They got promoted from being expert in their world. Expert is a stage in development, and they haven't yet developed beyond it, which is, I think it's achiever. I don't want to get the model wrong, but more or less, under stress and pressure, when not paying attention, they'll go deeper into where they are. Deep domain knowledge. ChatGPT, AI, does that without even thinking. It'll do it every day, forever, way better, way quicker, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. You will not win that game anymore. We must develop beyond it and become, instead of the flower, again, rooted and deep in place, we must become more like a bumblebee that can go across and around different flowers and then be the kind of assimilator or integrator of all of that individual knowledge. So being able to prompt ChatGPT, for example, assimilate that knowledge, ask it questions, think about it, integrate a little bit more to like higher level solutions, and then be able to make honey from the honeycomb. I mean, that's the work. So the move from flowers as leaders and the model of old, collect information, collect experience, that's how you got promoted. We get incentivized by that. Wrong. Will not last in this new time. The new time instead is to think beyond that into how can I integrate across all of these experts or deep domain knowledge kind of areas, pull it together by asking really thoughtful questions and think beyond quarter to quarter, but a little bit more long-term and more strategic. That's going to be definitely one of the shifts. The other is I think we're going to have more. So, I mean, I call myself a leadership coach, but what I should probably try and think about is moving it to like leadership team or something like that, because it's not anymore about the individual, it's about the collective. Yeah. What is it? On our own, we can go so far, together we can go further, right? So I think leadership coaching will probably evolve to like team coaching or like let's call it orchestration, something like that, where we nearly, it'll be flatter structures, it won't be as hierarchical, so there won't be as many levels to interrupt, there won't be a senior individual that will make all the decisions, it'll be a collective we rather than an individual I definitely see that as one of the shifts, but I also think we don't know. Yeah. We can ask, like tech is just 1 or 0, it's binary, so depending on what we ask it, we get back. And we can, it's the yin and the yang, there'll be a cost to every benefit, so it'll be the same with this. There will be a dark side and a shadow, and it's built into it. It's biased into the system because we're human. Now they're trying to unbias the bias, which just doesn't work.
Swings, just swings the other way.
Just doesn't work. So I think we need to slow, ask thoughtful questions, do it together. We will be forced, we will resist initially, and then we'll have to accept it. We'll have to lose some of the ego and the status that came from being a leader. And I think we could do some really cool things.
That's, I think, the message I'm trying to get across as a avid user, and I coach and I suppose train in that area. And one of the things I keep saying to people is, look, you can go and find out all its benefits. Just jump onto Instagram today. Right? You'll find out all the benefits you want to find out about AI and ChatGPT and whatever. Go and learn its limitations. Because we only know how to maximize the use of anything once we understand its limitations. And I think that's the important thing, is really going to understand what those biases are. How can I frame my questions to unwind those biases so that I now know what's coming out of this is more aligned to my values and my philosophies. So it's very interesting, I think, is we are in a very challenging world. So on that note, I'm now going to ask you a question. So what we've done is fed in your profile, your LinkedIn profile, to our friend ChatGPT, and he's come up with a nice wee question for you. So again, as you know, he likes to be a bit long-winded.
That's fine.
So I'm going to verbatim the way that's presented to me. You emphasize the importance of clearing mental, emotional, and physical clutter. If you could recommend one simple daily practice or ritual for busy leaders to help them declutter and find more clarity, what would it be and why?
It's a good question. Just walk in nature.
He's good at this, isn't he?
Yeah, just walk in nature a little bit more often. If you don't have time for nature, just focus on your exhale, extending long, slow exhales as if you're breathing out through a straw. If you don't have time for that, drink a glass of water and appreciate that it's clean. If you don't have time for that, speak with your PA, speak with your assistant, because there has to be 1 minute a day.
Yeah.
Clutter. Yeah, so it says one practice, didn't it?
Yeah.
Yes,
Go on, I'll give you two if
I've
you want to
listed
steal
off
it.
a few there. So, I mean, there are a few. Nature, breathing,
I love the
drink
nature
water.
one because it's very interesting. Our relationship came from meeting you on a nature walk, on a net walk, not a
Yeah.
network.
Thanks,
So
Johnny.
yes. So Johnny Bloomfield, shout out to Johnny Bloomfield for that. And the relationships in this room, the people that we can't see on screen as well, all came from that experience. So I think that's a massive point, that value in that get out into nature.
We are nature.
Yeah.
We are nature. We're built to be around trees. They breathe out what we breathe in. We breathe in what they breathe out, whatever way it is. The other thing I would say is, and I mean, I did this in a coaching conversation yesterday with an extremely successful business leader, is write out all the expectations that you have of yourself. I should, as a leader, whatever. People should, whatever. And you'll soon examine them and see they will never meet reality. And all you're doing is causing suffering. Let me give you an example. I should always be happy. Right? Reality, can I say a bad word?
Yeah.
Reality will shit on that expectation. So then you will just suffer when you're having a bad day. You're like, I should be different. No, but you are. So again, this is back to the being. Can you be and accept what is? Until you can, you'll just resist it. You'll just suffer. People should change quicker and not have to be told twice. Reality will shit on that. People will never live up to that. We must accept it rather than resist it, and then you won't suffer as much. That'll clean an awful lot of clutter. Typically, they're unconscious. When we get conscious of those patterns, it like releases such weight for people. It's wild.
I'm going to grab a pen and paper. I'm going to finish with, we call it our finisher. Thinking of the local business landscape. If today I put you in charge of the budget up at Stormont, what would you change and why? You have the purse strings to do something for either local business, local community. What would you change and why?
So I'm trying to think about it in two ways because the money always flows up. So for example, if you make kids wealthier, they'll just buy iPhones. So Apple will get the money eventually downstream. So what I'm trying to think is how can you make it a circular thing where the likes of Apple or any company that does business in the country is not incentivized, but definitely some form of having to give back to, let's say, local young entrepreneurs and teaching these skills in school. So, for example, I mean, I did a Myers-Briggs really quick exercise with somebody yesterday. They're like, how come I didn't learn this in school? I'm like, well, it's not really scientifically backed. It's a little bit woo-woo, but people find it really helpful. Why am I not learning this in school? Oh, okay. Maybe we teach those kind of skills in school through practical application. How can we get you running a business? How can we get you testing these stuff out in the real world and get you, like, can I go a little bit rogue?
Yeah.
I think we protect kids too much, and some bruising is helpful. The Buddha found enlightenment from leaving the castle walls, not from staying within them. If enlightenment is on the outside, we should teach our kids towards enlightenment, which is not keeping them safe, not cotton wool, wrapping them up. Business will do that to you. It'll teach you that some people say no, and you can resist it, or you can accept it and move on. And I think that would be really interesting. So how might you incentivize companies that are really large, who are already operating here or selling products here, to give back to local young entrepreneurial people, but also then use some of the money that's generated in between those two things to put it into skill development, for example, with AI. STEM subjects now, it's not about the teaching the technical, it's about teaching the prompting. And again, the bumblebee, not the flower skill. I think you could do some really cool work there. And then I think that if you created a network of people who are exceptional in tech and exceptional in business and just did a network of incentivize a network between them. So I have really good ideas, but I don't know how to make them.
Yeah.
AI will eventually be like, it can do the code. I just don't know how to do the coding to do it properly. I think you could do some really cool networking across those two domains, and you could do some really cool work. And I think it would be a absolute net positive to GDP and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, more or less. So incentivize the rich to do development and like incentives, or not incentives, internships or something within them that they get deep domain, but also kind of industry knowledge.
Yeah.
Use that money that's generated to give back and teach skill development, but also then combine business and tech and kind of some kind of...
You have a circular economy of sorts, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like it's vertical and it's horizontal, but at each different level towards it as well. I think you could do some cool stuff there. I don't think it would cost that much. It's probably just the start, but it's probably also making sure that the people that are in charge are incentivized in the right way. We are geared towards incentives, so I mean, doing that in the right way would probably make a difference.
Yeah, 100%. I noticed only recently Singapore. Have you seen in Singapore where they've created a bursary fund? What they've recognised is everybody over 40's skills in the modern world are now becoming not defunct, but some of the practical skills of AI and things. Scary thing is potentially making some of their skill sets obsolete. So what they've recognised is these people have hugely valuable skills.
Yes.
But what they don't want to do is lose that skill set out of the economy. So they've literally said everybody over 40 is going to get a bursary to retrain in areas to meet the modern demands. And I thought that's just such what I would class as an economic protection system is unbelievable. Whereas I just feel we're going to sit, as a country, we will just sit and watch and see what happens.
Yep.
And everybody will just leapfrog us and we'll be...
If you're not
still
moving
fighting and
forward,
struggling,
the world will pass you by. You are moving backwards if you're not moving forwards, and you are only ever moving forwards. It's in your direction or somebody else's.
Yeah. And I think it's a scary place in terms of us as an economy, thinking of the way our government works and thinks.
The answer will not come from government. The answer will come from business. Therefore, we must do the incentives.
Well, I'm a big believer in people. You'll always hear people about the system and not realising we are the system.
100%.
You know what I mean? We have the power. We have to influence that. We have to drive that because government will react to business demands. We just need enough business to want to move in the same direction.
Yes.
Yeah. Philip, it has been absolutely a pleasure. Thank you so much. Hopefully you've enjoyed the conversation, and I definitely want to catch up with you in series 2 when we go out on the road.
Yeah, we'd love to.
So, we'll do one of those road trips.
Yes.
I don't know, carting all this gear around with us maybe. Health would be challenging, but we'll find some way of doing it.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for being so thoughtful.
Thank you, mate.
Thanks, Jason.
Bye-bye.